Hi, my name is Luke, and welcome to the first digital, the Offertory. I want to share with you guys a story. It's a story from my life. It takes place about 67 years ago. Rock and roll music was all the rage, and it was the summer before my junior year of high school. Now, back in those days, we had something called the Lakewood Youth Mission, a week of service. We all lived in a cafeteria at a local middle school, and about 50 or 60 youth at the time came from all over Pierce County, all different churches, all different Christian denominations. And we spent a week in service. During the day, we do different service projects, and that night was kind of our time. We could hang out in the cafeteria, or there was an opportunity to go out and do activities that were sponsored by the different churches. So one particular church was having a revival. If you've never been to a revival, they're crazy. In a good way, but crazy nonetheless. So me and about 5 friends or so, in addition to the kids who were already part of the church's youth group, went to this revival. Now, I was born and raised Catholic, so we're like quiet, prayerful. Sometimes we stand, sometimes we sit down, sometimes we kneel, sometimes we do this. Sometimes we kneel again. I'm used to outside of, our, prayers that we say as a group, we're pretty quiet. There's not a lot of extra talking. Never has anybody asked for a witness during Mass, at least in my experience. That's not true for revivals, though. They're loud, and there's a lot going on, and everyone's talking, and everyone's doing their thing, and people are going crazy, man. There's people yelling for witnesses. Like I said before, people were doing that. That's not just a movie trope. That's a real thing. There's a guy in the back. He was yelling for a witness. There was a lady speaking in tongues. There's a lot of people singing, and they weren't even singing the same song as everyone else. They were just singing songs, man, because they're feeling it. They're feeling it. There was the choir up front. There was the organ. Well, it was a keyboard with an organ button, and there was a drummer. And there was a guy next to me. He was jumping up and down as high as humanly possible, like super high, like a 60-inch vertical. Probably played basketball. There's a girl in the aisle. She was spinning around in circles with her eyes closed. Granted, 300 people, tiny church, not a lot of room to spin around in a circle. And she kept on spinning and spinning and spinning, and then, boom, passed out. Literally just fainted on the floor. There was 2 big guys. They picked her up, dragged her to the back. Apparently that's their job. They pick up all the people who faint. I'm like, whoa, that girl just fainted. And this guy's like, no, it's cool. It happens all the time. And I was like, what? And then he proceeds to tell me that it's like a gift from the Holy Spirit. You get so filled with the Holy Spirit, you pass out. I was thinking it had probably something to do with the fact that there's 300 people in a tiny church and only 2 fans on the, spinning around, creating circulation. But yeah, he was telling me, he's like, oh man, there's talking in tongues, there's hysterical laughter, there's passing out, there's spinning around a circle and jumping up and down. These were all gifts of the Holy Spirit. Now, quiet Catholic, I haven't heard these before, but I'll buy it. I'll talk a little bit more about those. I'm going to take those gifts, I'm going to put them over here for later in the story. So continuing the story, this guy comes up to the front, right? And he's like talking and he's preaching and everyone's feeling it. And the choir's feeling it and the girl in tongues feeling it. And there's still that guy in the background. He hasn't found a witness yet, but he's still looking for him. And this guy's like telling us his name's the Cardinal, right? No idea what his real name was, but he goes by the Cardinal. And he had his red, shiny robes on, and he had a big gold cross, and he had his little red cardinal skull cap, and he looked like a cardinal. I don't think he was a real cardinal, but I'm not here to debate that. That's what he went by. I'll buy it. So he's preaching, everyone's feeling it, and my friends over here are feeling it. The 5 of us that went, they're feeling it, and then the guy that did the 60-inch vertical, he's feeling it. The girl that passed out in the back, well, she's back in the front, and she's spinning around in circles again, and she's feeling it again, wakes up, starts spinning again, obviously, and then the Cardinal's like, stop, and he invites people to come up to the front, right, to express their faith. to encounter Jesus. So I had one of my friends, she walks up to the front. 60-inch vertical guy, he walks up to the front. Spinning around in circles, passed out girl, she walks up to the front. I'm like, man, I want to feel the Spirit. I want to encounter Jesus. So I walk up to the front. And one by one, the cardinal goes up to each person and he like grabs them on the shoulders and he starts shaking you, right? And he's shaking and the people are shaking. And then one by one, he goes up and he gets to me. And I think he said something. I'm not 100% sure what it was. Even the day after, it was such a sensory overload that I have no idea what was being talked about. I just remember seeing everything that's going on. So he gets up to me and he starts shaking and I start shaking and we're shaking. And he's definitely feeling something. And the girl next to me was feeling something. And 60-inch vertical guy was feeling something. And the girl that was spinning around in circles who passed out, woke up, spun around, that came up to the front, she was feeling something. And I, nothing. It was just like, nothing. I didn't feel a thing. Completely void of all emotion. On the outside, I was doing this, and everyone's like, man, he's feeling something. He looks like he's feeling Jesus. But I wasn't. It was just empty. So then the event ends. We get back to the cafeteria with all those kids in it. And they're all just like, they're curious. They're curious about the event. Now, the kids from the church, they actually stayed behind because apparently it kept on going very late into the night, or there's like a part 2 or something. But for us, we went back, the 5 that weren't members of the church. And they're like, what happened? How is it going? And they're like, oh, it was crazy. This girl, she went up to the front and she was feeling it. And then Luke went up to the front and he was feeling it. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. I'm Luke. I was feeling it. The cardinal shook me. We shook together. Definitely something was happening. Nothing. It dawned on me that everyone there was having this genuine moment where they encountered Christ and were being filled by the Holy Spirit. But me, I had to lie about it. And that did not make me feel good. In fact, I felt pretty awful about that. So everyone kept on talking, and I just felt worse and worse and worse and worse. And eventually, I wanted to be alone, so I left the cafeteria, and I walked outside. And outside, there was some concrete here, there's a patch of grass there, and then there was this dirt, and then a big brick wall. And I was like, that looks like a good place to sit. So I sit down, and I got angry. I was really angry. I was angry at the people inside, the 49 to 59 kids who were inside having a good time encountering Jesus. I was angry at the people in church, this girl over here, this guy here, this girl over here. I was angry at all of them. I was mad because they got to see Christ and I didn't. And that eventually turned into anger at Christ. I was mad at Christ. How dare he show himself to other people, show himself to the person to this side of me, to the people in front of me, to the people beside me, to the people behind me, and not show himself to me. I had to lie about meeting Christ because he didn't show up for the meeting. I had to pretend because he wasn't there. I was looking for him and he never showed up. I was very angry. I was an angsty teenager. Shockingly. I felt betrayed by everybody, by the 49 to 59 kids in the room. I felt abandoned by God, by Jesus. And I just felt like my soul was being tortured. And then it dawned on me. Betrayed, abandoned, tortured. Anger that I had towards everybody else spiraled out of control, boomeranged, and came back at me. Because I realized that everything I felt, even though I was an angsty teenager and I was certain that nobody could ever understand how I felt, everything that was in my heart, all the emotions, the pain, the suffering, has happened before. Jesus understood that. He was betrayed. He was tortured. My God, why have you abandoned me? He understood how I felt. Anything that I could possibly feel, Jesus already undertook that. And he undertook it for me. So now the anger that I had, and it was an explosive anger. I was verbally yelling at this brick wall, right? If you were to walk by, you would hear some kid screaming at a wall, right? All that was now directed at me. I was angry with myself. And that darkness that I was feeling got darker. And the emptiness and the blackness that I was feeling here felt more empty. The blackness felt blacker, darker, if that's even possible. So I get up, stand up, get out of the dirt, walk inside, sit down. Those 49 to 59 kids were now in a huge circle, and it was a big massage circle. Everybody was giving each other back massages. It was nice. It was pleasant to see. Everyone's so caring and loving. And one kid gets up, and she asks, "Are you feeling okay?" And I'm just honest. Nope. And then she asks, "Do you want to talk about it?" No, I do not want to talk about it. So I sit there and I say nothing else. She says nothing else. She just sits down. She didn't put her arms around me. She didn't try to comfort me. She just sat there and was in that moment with me. I didn't realize it at the time, but just her being there was like the closest thing that I've ever witnessed to Christ's love. Sometimes he's just there in the moment with you. And I never noticed that before. I didn't notice it then. So I get up and leave. I leave her and the other kids. I go back outside. I find my spot in the dirt. And then I noticed it. But before then, let me step out of the story. The talk is called Dark Night of the Ordinary Soul, which is a play on St. John of the Cross. He wrote a poem and a book entitled Dark Night of the Soul. Now, the book is broken up into two parts. There's book the first, book the second. Book the first is all about sin, in a sense, spiritual sins, right? Where you're like, oh, you may think you're a good, holy, humble person, but you're not. You're an awful human being. The book is terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying. And book the first breaks you down. It tears you apart. And at the end of book the first, and that's kind of where I was, right? I was being torn apart. I felt like crap. After all this, after you just feel like an awful person, after everything is dark, but when you think it can't get any darker, when you think the night's at its darkest, book the first ends. Right, so that's me. Book the first is now coming to an end. I can't get any lower. I'm as low as possible. I am literally sitting in the dirt. That's as low as I can go. John of the Cross does something in his book that is terrifying. Because after all this, after you feel so bad, after you are broken down, he says, and the dark night begins. Seriously, John? Seriously? The dark night is now beginning? What just happened? What did I go through? What was this massive decline in the first book? The first part of the night. What was that? If that was not the dark night, I don't want to turn the page. I don't want to know what happens next, because you just said the dark night is beginning, and this was the scariest thing that I've ever encountered in my life. And now you're telling me it just started? The dark night begins. And you have to understand that to St. John of the Cross, the dark night, originally it was a poem, then a book. It's a love poem. And you're like, but the first book was frightening. How is that a love poem? The first verse of the poem, originally written in Spanish, it's roughly translated. An obscure night, fevered with love's anxiety, O hapless, happy plight. He's happy. And the reason John of the Cross is happy is because this dark night is where he meets his beloved. And the veil of darkness is where he finally encounters Christ. So back into the story. I didn't know about John of the Cross at the time, but I was thinking about that girl and her just sitting there and being in the moment with me. I came to realize that guy, he was there the whole time. He was there in the moment. He wasn't there with his arms around me, because sometimes that's not what we need. Sometimes we just need somebody to be there for us. I didn't realize it. I didn't see it because I was shrouded in my own darkness. I refused to look slightly to my side because I was always looking forward. And he wasn't there in front of me. He wasn't there behind me. He was just there beside me. It took me a long time to realize that, but when I did, I started smiling. I started laughing. I was sitting in the dirt in front of a brick wall, laughing like a madman. This emptiness that I felt, all of a sudden was overflowing. I couldn't contain it. I had so much energy. It's like when runners talk about they get that second wind and all of a sudden they have this burst of energy. Like, I was feeling this burst of energy, man. And I stood up and I started running. You know, there's a big field behind the middle school, and I was just running through it. It's like middle of the night, pitch black outside, and I'm running through that dark night, man, because I'm running somewhere. I'm going somewhere, and I'm feeling it. And then I start jumping up in the air. It's crazy, man. Eyes shut. Have you ever ran with your eyes shut? It is frightening, exhilarating, all at the same time. So I'm running with my eyes shut. I'm jumping with my eyes shut. I'm spinning around in circles. I'm laughing like a madman. Gifts of the Holy Spirit that I learned about. Hysterical laughter, jumping up and down, spinning around in circles. I didn't faint. That would have been bad. But here I am, just like doing all these things that at the time I thought were crazy, and I'm doing them. And I guess that makes me a little crazy, but you know, being a little crazy is fun sometimes. And I never felt so much pouring out of my heart. I've never felt that much coming up, man. I was at that low, and now I'm hitting that high note. And it felt amazing. So step outside the story, because that's kind of where the story ends. But I want to emphasize the dark night. Now, most of my story was building up to the last few minutes. And like I said, the dark night of the soul, it sounds frightening. And for good reason, it can be. If Christ is the light, we can't come to understand. We can't comprehend. We can never truly understand what light is unless we know what darkness is. You will never find the light unless you first found darkness. It's these contrasts, these contradictions that exist, but one cannot exist without the other. Light has no meaning unless you know what darkness is. And that's what the dark night of the soul is. So if you're feeling like you're going through a period of darkness, know this, that by understanding what darkness is, you will come to truly understand who Christ is, the light. So this was a pretty crazy story for me in my life. And it happened all in one night, one very emotional night. Now, I would love to sit back and tell you, hey, everything is perfect. I met Christ. We hung out. We went for a jog. We laughed, jumped up, and spun around in circles. And it was fun. And we've been having a great relationship ever since. But that's not true. I struggle every single day. That every time I have this spiritual high, the spiritual lows seem so much lower. Because what happens is, like, my spirit, my capacity to feel gets bigger and bigger with every encounter with Christ. And when it gets empty, this big cup seems more empty. And then I fill it up again, and then it gets empty. And it's still big, right? But it just feels more empty because my capacity to feel Christ's love has grown so much. So even though it feels like I'm taking 10 steps back, I'm actually building towards that future. So that's my story. Sometimes you have to hit this low before you can hit that high. That sometimes you have to walk through the darkness in order to see the light. As a world, as a global community, we're going through a period of darkness. And my prayer is that once we get through this darkness, we can truly understand and appreciate the light. All right, stay safe, stay healthy, and God bless.